comment something on the chat if you are wanting to get your hand history analyzed. So at least Egi and Danita are here. Okay, so Egi can see, can you hear? At least from here it seems like audio is working. Okay, Danita followed instructions. So there was also, I think, few other players or users sending. So Action Willy Koopa. And Kaleidoscope seems to be a new one. So I will save this Kaleidoscope and history. And you can still send new ones during the coaching. So Koopa is here as well. But let's start soon with first raffle. And well, Action Willy has actually commented as well. So let's go with first raffle with these ones. And Action Willy won. So what was the username? Okay, same username. So I can find it. Okay, I actually had already chosen here. So we had two histories. Let's go with the first one. So which? Not sure. Well, anyway, let's go with this one. This one has 100 hands. Some static noise from microphone. Is it bad or? Not sure why the HUDs are not updating either. Well, so Pocket 6 is here anyway. Pretty easy shoving spot, and any pocket pair, of Of course, big pocket you might want to be min raising, depending of the villains behind. Okay, those 10 pretty clear fold. I think this started from final 2 tables, so it's actually in final table bubble. And these were 45 men, so I think it was for seven players into monies, and in here ace-9 is kind of weak. Okay, yeah, it actually updates these depending of the hand, it seems. But basically, I think when he shoves, he often has capped range here. So I would be surprised to see like big pocket from the villain. So I think something like ace-jack would be something to call here. And we can actually also check our calling range in this spot. I would assume that ace-9 is going to be still too wide because of the there is some ICM consideration, but let's see. I had things prepared before the coaching, but something went kind of wrong. So usually what I would recommend is to use 80-20 structure when you are outside of final table. So it includes some ICM, so it's just not pure chip EV decision. And in here, if villain is shoving 23% of range, we can only call ace-jack off. Of course, as I said, I usually would assume villain is not going to have, at least quite often I would say that he would probably min-raise ace-king at least. So if we discount those, then our range is going to be a bit wider. But still, ace-9 off would be minus EV, so... And this range already does include decent amount of suited stuff, Broadway stuff, and so on, so... It would require villain, also all suited aces are in the range, so it would require that villain would be shoving weakest offsuit aces as well, pretty much. He does have ace-5 suited, but basically if we want to check how ace-9 will be doing and how wide his range is going to be, we can use the glut function, so it would go pretty close to 35% if villain range is not going to be capped, meaning that he would be shoving premium stuff as well. But of course, if we do think that he's going to shove good amount of those aces and discount some of these premium hands, then it's probably quite close, but as now it would be a bit plus EV, but in general I think ace 9 off is going to be kind of the thin if we don't have reason to discount even further of these bigger aces and so on, which might be reasonable. If stream is not working, you can try to use the pop-out version if you are currently using the Twitch one, and I think there was also some option for the YouTube if it's currently in use. King 8 off, we have to be folding here. I think something like King 10 off would probably be bottom what I would open here, and we would have to call against blinds because they are so short stacked. And if we have something like, let's say, Queen Jack suited, I would say it's totally reasonable to open shove as well, because we don't really want to min raise and then give these stacks option to shove, and we kind of have to fold after that. Six five off. I would fold here. Good pot odds, of course, but 6-5 off will be playing pretty badly. And in those situations, it's also good to have some sort of read if the lane range is going to be trap heavy. And this is kind of spot where I might be shoving if I have suited ace, but I think as default, min raise folding is going to be more reasonable. You have blocker value, especially if villains are playing against you mostly by shoving here. But shoving here, I think, is going to be kind of, it's probably profitable still, but we think that villains are on the passive side more, than min raise folding is more likely better option. And in here you can see that you can check behind. Both options are reasonable. Main benefit from c-betting is that you protect your hand and don't give him free equity. But at the same time, if you face check raise, you kind of have to fold, because you are usually against some sort of decent drawing hand or hand that crushes you. So, and c-bet sizing here. What sort of c-bet sizing would you guys use here? It's easier to discuss about hands, and would you c-bet or not? I could also open the Twitch chat. Okay, so options and view hand details. Okay. So yeah, if we see that here our sizing should be at maximum 2000, and I think even a bit smaller is totally fine, like 1600, 1800. I would probably not go below that, because then you are kind of giving two great pot odds, but it's flop that won't be hitting villain easily, and because of the stack sizes, you don't really need to be c-betting over 2000 anyway if you want to get the chips here in, so using half pot is kind of unnecessary. And if you do get shoved here or check raised, you are kind of have to fold. But basically, as far as villain is not attacking with air here, so if he's folding stuff like queen 10 for example, c-betting is going to be totally fine, but if he's the type of player that might be attacking sometimes with air type of hands, then we should not really be c-betting. Okay, so yeah, use smaller c-bet sizing if c-betting. And as default, I would go with c-bet. Or was this actually final table already? Because well, we can check it by checking how much chips there is in play. So this is actually final table already. So we have pocket nines. This is something you can min raise pretty nicely. It's decently going to play decently post flop, and you can induce. But in general, if you have a read that villains are really call happy, then I don't really mind to open shove this either. But if they are type of players, for example, if small blind is basically never going to be flatting if you min raise that he's going to fold or shove, then min raising is going to be much better overall. But definitely if you have some small pocket like sixes or smaller, then you should definitely be shoving, in my opinion, always. And yeah, there is no additional delay on the stream now, so yeah, the ace-8 call. Yeah, it was bad on the assumption that we have 80-20 structure as well, so it's most likely even worse in the final table. Especially as we had kind of big stack. So they are folding. If you have tight reads here, then you can min raise, but otherwise I would be open folding. I don't really think that this sort of hand is going to be that great to limp either, and when action Willy is I would assume kind of starting player, I think it's also easier to keep the style more on min raise fold. And folding is definitely default play, but if you have tight reads, you can go for min raise. And 9-10 suited here. Basically, you can even shove here, which is totally fine in my opinion, because there is decent amount of ICM, and from this sample, these two players seems kind of decent. So they don't want to be taking light calls in situation where there is clear small stack in the play. Other option is to min raise and call against small blind. I would never fold here pretty much. And if these medium stacks are going to play tightly against you, then I think min raise folding against them is most likely better option. Take call. This is pretty nice spot to be c-betting as default. 10 high is not going to be that great, and villain is unlikely to hit this. And with this stack setup, he's probably not getting too tricky most often. Yeah, I can check the ace-9 on the end of this hand history review as well. So I would be c-betting here at maximum 2000 again. So yeah, this is pretty usual. In general, your c-bet sizing should be depending of the board, and this one is basically a really dry one. Overall, villain unlikely has much of combination that would be hitting this sort of board, so it's basically dry flop, and you don't need to use big c-bet sizing, but half pot is definitely something at maximum size, but even smaller would be good, because villains are usually going to fold pretty close to same frequency. And in here with ace-5, how would you guys be playing this one? I can actually search and put the ace-9 hand into ace-9 hand into Hold'em resources again. By shoving, yeah, you should be always shoving here, basically. It's always clearly profitable, and problem of min raising is that we give him great price to call from position. I think only situation where you want to min raise, which might be better EV, is if you think villain is going to be really tight. So it would be pretty exploitable option to just min raise fold, but this has multiple problems. That shoving is clearly profitable, you can't be raise calling here, and also you give him the option to call from position, and your hand is rarely going to hit anything on the flop pretty much. So most of the time you are going to have ace high or like weak pair, or sometimes of course a hits, but pretty clear decision to shove. And here is actually the ace-9 hand spot. So when the situation is in final table, and we are so deep stack as well, villain's 18 BB deep, we are 12, and there is 8 BB player, so even if he shoves 40%, our calling range is going to be really tight. And I did have the 45-man structure in use. So if villain is shoving 40%, you can only call this sort of range. So you have to be really tight. And even if we decrease some of the premium hands and still keep his range otherwise same, it's not going to change that much. So even ace queen would be marginal, and I would say this is pretty much the most optimal and most likely too optimistic situation for you with the ace-9. And in here, when the smallest stack is on the BB, I would tend to fold probably. If you think he's folding really much, then you can min raise, call, or shove, but I think as default he's so clear small stack that I would want to have a bit better hand overall. In here you have pretty nice spot to be shoving as default, to apply a lot of ICM pressure. But again, if you have a read that these players are tight, then you can move more into min raise option, and of course calling any ace here definitely. This is kind of spot where if I think villain's on the tighter side, or even in as default, I might min raise here because I want to usually have kind of polarized min raising range, that I have stuff that I'm inducing with, and then I have some total cracks. So this is kind of hand I think which you could be using, because most of mediocre hands you actually want to be shoving here to force ICM pressure on this guy. And 9 king, again something you could try to min raise when these players seems to be pretty tight against it. Now they both call, flop is pretty nice for you, so I would be c-betting small and calling off something like 3000, 2500. And this is kind of unnecessary, because the point is in here that if you c-bet like 3000, villains might actually think they have fold equity perhaps. But now when you size it 5000, they never... in the ace-9 hand, villain was shoving like 18 pp, it's here. So it's shoving situation where this cutoff was shoving 18 pp, you have 12 pp in the final table. So you called his shove, and because of the ICM it's going to be pretty horrible. So yeah, c-bet smaller, because now they can't assume any fold equity and they will likely tighten up. But they are never folding better hand anyway, so... And this is kind of again a spot where you can go with the open shove. This is decent, good enough hand, and now you actually have a bit more fold equity probably against PP, and we can actually also check that one quickly. So in NAS or FGS1 we can shove this sort of range, and it's of course marginal if villains are calling with these sort of ranges, but at the same time this is the situation to apply some ICM pressure, and it's actually kind of good that if we check same situation and let's say that these stacks would be other way around. Now our range should be actually quite a bit wider, because small blind is less likely to be calling, and PP has to be relatively tight still. So it's not the optimal decision to go with really wide range when the small stack is on the PP, but the same time it's spot where we don't want to get extremely tighter. And as default, I would be shoving here if you don't have a reason to believe that he's inducing. Against Rex, this is more questionable spot in a way that Will Lane might think that you understand the situation and so on, but I think in small stakes, if you don't have tight reads on the Will Lane, this is pretty nice spot to be re-stealing. And calling is kind of problematic because most of the time you will have just a high. Just a high, so for example, what are you going to do if Will Lane c-bets? Of course now, when it goes checked, you should be aiming to get to free showdown pretty much. And when we see that he actually opened a 6-7 shooter in that situation, we would have had really great spot briefly to be shoving, unless he's like making totally absurd calls as well. But even if he raise calls something like whatever Queen Jack or something, it's not like total disaster for us. And yeah, definitely folding here. Nine suited. Well, if you min raise here, you have to call against smaller stacks. So usually I would be just shoving because small blind shouldn't be calling. But of course he's probably not going to fold any big aces either, but shoving is definitely going to be profitable. Kind of bad flop for the range this Will Lane should have, but it might still be a bit better to be c-betting and mostly giving up. Because if he does have like some mediocre AX he's calling or some pocket nines type of hand, he's probably folding that good amount of time. And against regressional player I would be shoving any tool if it's unopened. And we have seen that this guy seems to be quite call happy, and this small blind should be playing quite widely with his stacks, so I don't mind folding here. And this is kind of situation where I would be shoving pretty much always. But if you min raise, you again have to call because of the board dodge against these mediocre stacks pretty much. And pretty nice flop, so yeah, just c-bet call. You can even shove here. I don't think you really want to be checking because you have a good amount of outs. Basically 8 outs to straight and even the backdoor flush. Even Queen or Jack might be out. And you might even get something like small blind to fold, for example some 10x maybe. But when you check and for example if this button shove, then you are in kind of tricky spot, but basically here you have 30% pot odds. With straight outs alone you have have around 32%. You can use the simplified rule of 4 times the outs you have. So you kind of need to call this one, but by betting yourself you would have some fold equity as well. Of course, against that hand it doesn't really matter. And this is pot to shove any two. Most of players will be folding enough for any two shove to be good, because they want to be getting into second position and this sort of hand. It's in a way it's decent hand to be limping, but when you can apply huge amount of ICM pressure on the opponent and you are this short, it's kind of bad to not use this pot. And usually I would be c-betting a bit smaller here. Of course now it's draw heavy board, so you have reason to go for a bit bigger c-bet. But I would be using the half pot in this pot. And this I would probably shove as well. Stack setup is pretty nice. We don't really risk much and PP has space to be folding. So now we are in heads up. You can min raise, you can limp. Even shoving might be kind of okay, but as default I would limp or min raise. And checking here is fine, especially when you don't have history from the heads up, probably against the villain. But here you have to be betting to build the pot. If he has some sort of strike draw, he might be calling. So now the problem is that you have hit premium hand, but you haven't got the pot any bigger. And I think pot size is totally fine here. If he has queen, he's probably going to call it. Or even 4. Ace 4 we should be shoving. King 7 we should be shoving. And Queen 10 we should be shoving. So yeah, bit more aggression on the final table at least, and study those calling situation, how much the ICM affects, because the ace-9 call on the final start of final table was pretty bad mistake. And especially in MTTs or MTT SNGs in early part. Yeah, it was small stake, 45 men for the Twitch chat. So ICM is not big concern during the early or middle part, even in MTT SNCs, but those endgame decisions are going to be really important. So Action Willy won previous one, so let's remove him. There was I forgot his name. It was this. Leidos, who was commenting a bit late. And has there been any new hand histories? Okay, so no new ones, so let's go for next raffle. Also, Kuupa is the winner this time. Before action, Willy commenting that pretty often I chase opponents out of hands, playing scared. That's the one of quite common mistakes. I think that some people or beginning players are kind of overprotecting their hands, and it can actually work pretty decently in microstake in a way that big amount of player pool is going to be calling too much with drawing hands and weaker made hands, so it can actually be kind of okay even, but even against bit better players is often going to be a problem that you are getting too many weaker hands to fold. Drawing hands don't get even close to the buttons they need, so they are often going to be folding or then making some check raises or something. So yeah, Kuupa won. What was your nick? So it was Hero. You can, of course, if you don't want to reveal your nick, which is totally reasonable, you want to be... I would prefer that you change your nick into same, for example, what that you have on the forums, because when there are multiple heroes in my database, it's often going to be problematic. So this one was $5. MTT. Seven hands. Do you guys want to have MTT break, or do we just continue? So first hand ace queen. Someone min raises. Well, you should be never folding unless you have like total rock reach maybe on the ville. I would personally call here pretty often. Well, this might be from my SNG background, but I think kind of risk by 3-betting is that you get Villain to fold some of his hands, and his range might be pretty tight when you 3-bet from early position against early position, but of course if you have assumption that he's going to continue with a lot of hands, then it's totally reasonable to isolate. And King, Queen, Jack, 2 players, I would pretty much always check behind here. But Hero goes for bet. Well, the good side of this is of course that you keep keep your range uncapped, because you would be c-betting here most likely with all sets at least. It's actually questionable, do you want to be c-betting here always with pocket aces, for example, because king, queen, jack is going to hit pretty strongly against ranges this guy should have against 3-betting, against your 3-bet pre-flop. So if we think, for example, that open raiser is going to fold some of his hands, most likely hands he's going to continue will be, of course, pocket pairs that are going to miss here a good amount of time, but also the good Broadway hands. So personally I don't really see, because of course there are some hands that can call you, for example some queen 10, king 10, or king 10 is ahead, jack 10, pocket 10s, and so on, but I would prefer to have some pot control here. And you continue to bet. It is again kind of questionable unless you have some sort of information that villain is pretty big calling machine. And here you can't really value bet anymore. So you are practically turning your hand into bluff here, which in my opinion is going to be pretty bad. Of course you can get something like king 10, for example, to fold, but if he has any sort of two pairs or better, he's most likely not going to fold. And if this guy is some random recreational type player, then I don't think he's going to be folding that many king x either, so I would assume this is probably more of value bet, but pretty hard to get caught by weaker hand. Even if you had like ace king, this would be really marginal, and you would need to have some sort of reason to believe that villain is quite a big calling machine. Because he can pretty easily play two pair type of hands, for example, maybe some pocket jacks this way and so on. So when he folds, I think he has weaker hand most often, and sometimes that king 10, but it doesn't really make any sense to turn that hand into bluff. So my line here would be to check the flop. If both players check the turn, then I would go for the late c-bet pretty often. So this was limped pot. You can check here, you can lead, both are totally fine. And perfect turn card, so continue to bet. Villains can still call. I would actually prefer smaller sizing here, something like 6 to 700. To keep villains ranges wider, you don't really have much to be scared here. Just backdoor flush draw, which is unlikely, but you want in general for villains to continue with some two pair combinations. And of course if they have 9 they are going to continue anyway, but I think there is some chance that villains would be. Of course if we think that villains are always going to fold basically two pairs, then going for bigger sizing is fine, and hope they have the 9. Is 3 suited open. Well, pretty fishy looking bet. I would pretty much always call here. Of course, if you think that he's going to play pretty straightforward and he might be stacking off with 10x, for example, then raising is definitely better. But if you think that this is sort of bluffing stab, then I think, or if we think that he might be able to fold some of 10x, for example, then calling is going to be definitely better. And pretty much same apply here, just call and keep his bluffs in here. And pretty unlucky result. But yeah, you could fold if heart comes in the river. It would be reasonable, but in this situation it's not really possible. Well, I think in turn I would personally at least just call again, because that sort of line looks kind of bluffy to me. I think there is quite a lot of value in keeping his bluffs in play, and he's going to spew sometimes on the river. Pretty crappy hands. Well, pot odds are great, and we are most likely in chip EV play. Definitely if this was suited or some sort of 8-7 defend would be standard. Not totally sure about this sort of defend against early position open. But when we defend, we definitely want to be check calling here. Check raising, I don't really see what's the point here. Most likely he won't be folding any sort of better hand, so only good side about this sort of line is that he might be folding some sort of 2 overcard combinations, but I don't really think you should be turning this hand into bluff here. Not really much. Basically, most of better hands won't be folding most likely. You don't have much outs to improve your current hand. So well, kind of funny spot. Well, he won't most likely have huge amount of 10x combos. Of course, some sort of pocket 10s. Jack 10 probably not opening. Well, might be Jack 10 suited. But I think most of the time he doesn't have that many 10x in his range in this spot. Of course 10-9 is also possible if he's opening that sort of hand. We don't have much of sample on the guy. So I think this is decent spot to continue. We have a lot more 10x in our range. So again, would we... Well, you are check raising 8-5, so maybe you are check raising but in general we should not be check raising flop if we have like 8-10 or jack-10. So if we lens thinking player, I think he might not believe that easily. We are basically wrapping like 10-9, pretty much, in my opinion. Because would we value bet here even with 5-6, for example? Because there is kind of danger that villain is going to fold most of the hands that doesn't have 10 in them. But yeah. I think betting turn is totally fine if we choose to turn our hand into bluff in the flop, but in general I don't see that much point in turning the hand into bluff. Queen 10. Well, I think calling here is going to be reasonable. Total grab 3 bet, of course cutoff versus button, it's a good spot for that, so if you have reason to believe that he's folding good amount of time, then yeah, it's reasonable, but without such reach, this is going to be pretty spooky. And in general, you have to think that he's folding huge amount of time to make this sort of play. You don't have any sort of blocker value or basically any post play ability. So we get kind of good flop, we have double gut shot. And yeah, so I would personally go for c-bet here. It's not going to hit that heavily probably against villains ranges. Or if we think that villains are defending, playing hands that hits that really often, then 3-betting pre-flop is going to be quite catastrophic, I would say. But you check behind, they check again. Well, I think it's quite reasonable that they don't have top pair or better here. So I would definitely go for delayed c-bet now. Now it's a lot harder to get them to fold something. Maybe they fold a high. But with the action that they have been checking all the time, I would probably try to stop here anyway. But it's just that in turn, I think your bluff will have a lot more success, because they have to be thinking that you might be shoving the river 10. But if we think villains are relatively tight with relatively tight ranges, I think c-betting here is totally fine as well. So heads up both would be reasonable to bet. When he makes it pot size. It's kind of tricky because, of course, for next street you only have around like 17%, 16% to hit, so you don't get direct bottles and you are out of position. So I would be folding here because of that. Now he's betting 1000. And well, 10 is possible to be out. So you can basically count like 10 outs. So you kind of get pot odds here. And yeah, leading is reasonable here. When the flush draw misses, we might get called by some sort of two pair set combos. But if we check, he's going to be checking behind a lot of those hands. Of course, if he has some sort of, for example, a high flush draw with no real showdown value, he might try to bluff it as well. So I think both lines have their good and bad sides. But if this wasn't like nine of club, I don't see any reason to be betting yourself, because it would be really difficult to get called by weaker hand. If I'm limping here as default, I would go with stepping line. You have more recreational line here. But basically, in my opinion, if you are betting like 400 here, you don't have to success that often. Wheel lane is quite rarely going to have hit the flop either. And you don't really have much to hope with this hand, so check calling doesn't really make that much sense. Of course, you are representing showdown value with that line if wheel lane is happening to think about that. In here I would doubt this would be plus EV call. In turn, well, by betting and turning your hand into bluff, you can get some pocket pairs to fold, but anything else is not going to be folding, so I would be checking behind here. Now he does call. And quite often you are going to be behind here, but flush draw doesn't complete. King comes, of course, if he has been check calling with pocket tens or something, then he might be folding. But again, I would say that a high is not going to be folding most of the time. But personally, I would be folding this pre-flop, or if you want to be making like 3 bets, then this sort of hand would make more sense than 8-4 off. So at least this has some potential to actually hit something. And again, this sort of spot, especially if you have this sort of player that he has been playing half of his hands behind you, my 3-betting range would be pretty value heavy. So we are, in my mind, spewing pretty much here. And his c-bet is something. Well, you are in 4-way pot. This flop is so drawy. Like, it's quite a miracle if you get folds here. Definitely just check fold this flop. Ace 3. There is like 600 and the adjusted. But if I want to play this, I would be min raising, but that's only when there is tight enough players. So as default, from this early position, I would be open folding this one. And that was the last hand, so we had quite a 3-bet happy situations. Those are reasonable plays if you have a read to believe that you have fold equity decent amount. But if you don't have 10, you want definitely to have playability in your 3-bet range at least, and not have total crap. And of course, 3-betting those total crap is not really that recommended overall. So yeah, that was pretty wild playing. So let's go for the next one. And Ghaleon is winner. I didn't actually import that history yet, so let's import. What was it? It was Boja. And this was $3.5 sit and go, it seems. Nine-man sit and go turbo speed, most likely. Yeah, pretty standard first hand. In here, yeah, we want to be opening, and something 50 to 60 is reasonable open size here. From late position, 50 is totally fine. Especially when there is antes from the beginning. Yeah, hopefully connection works. When there is antes from the beginning, there is a lot more to steal compared to situation where there is no antes. In here, I would usually check call the flop, because for one, flop is really dry, and you have kicker problem with your ace, so you can't really go for multiple straight of value by betting here. So if you are c-betting here, you should basically always check on the turn if villain calls. But when the flop is this dry, I usually want to be checking this sort of weak aces to have some of AX combination in my checking range and allow him to bluff. Because what quite often happens here is that when you see bet, villains will be folding quite often. Stuff like queen jack, king queen. Depends, of course, in small stakes they might call as well, but it's usually kind of tricky to get value by betting. Ace 9, I would be folding from that early position. Yeah, I forgot to, should have made some sort of test streaming, because I quite recently updated to Windows 10, so in here pretty decent spot to be c-betting. Of course, the problem here is that villain might not be folding like a high, for example, so that's one reason to be checking behind as well. But at the same time, if villain is just folding a lot of his stuff outside of a highs or flush draws or king x, pretty much, it's going to be directly profitable. King queen in 7-handed, I would be min raising or making a little bit over. And well, this is a situation where in general villain is going to have decently strong range. Of course, when we have information that he has played half of his hand, but he might have quite wide range even, but it's kind of spot that villain might not be folding like a highs here, and he might, this sort of player might even connect with 7-6 here. So, and usually if we have indication that villain is maybe 50-50 type of player, I don't really like to be c-betting with idea to continue barrel on the diamond turns, because it just often ends up in bluffing against someone who just doesn't fold. So I think just check folding is totally reasonable. In here I would definitely defend like against min raise. Against 3x I think it's reasonable to be folding, and of course again, when you don't have that much experience, it's usually going to be better to be a bit tighter pre-flop to not end up into as tricky situations post-flop. So that's of course something to remember as well. In here we have to fold. So now we have 20 hands on the villain here, and he has been pretty passive. So basically you have option to call or 3-bet here. With this stack size you have, it's totally reasonable to 3-bet call. Good side of just calling is that villain range stays wider. So, for example, if we have a lot more hands and he has been this passive, I don't mind to just flat at all. Shoving. I would kind of prefer to 3-bet small if we want, because we want to get value from the guy. So if we shove here, the danger is that he's going to be folding close to all of his weaker stuff. So even if by 3, of course this is again kind of situation that shoving is going to be plus EV, 3-betting small can bring nasty situations if we lane flats. So it's simple, more simple style to be shoving, but as said, it has some problems. In here we kind of have to be shoving against button open even from the passive player, but we just have such smallish stack overall, or like this is pretty nice stack to be re-stealing against late position, or re-shoving against late position open, because easily his range is going to be wide. Still wide enough for that to be plus EV. And calling from small blind is always kind of problematic, because we invest decently much and we then give really great pot odds for PP. Any comments on the Twitch? Would be probably good idea to add that one into the stream. King 10 we can be opening. I would personally use just min raising if you want to be opening. Again, not mandatory open. Like King Queen off, you should always be opening. At least King Jack suited. I think those are just two good hands in six-handed situation. And there's not like that many good shoving stacks, pretty much small blind. Small blind only. Ace Queen, min raising is the best option. Ace 9 you can fold. If you min raise, you usually want to be calling against PP because he has such small stack size overall. But it's going to be pretty marginal, so open folding is totally reasonable here. Again, situation where I think ace 10 is already something that you should still definitely open here. And well, this is again kind of situation where well, if you have this sort of information or data that on bigger sample his statistics would be something like this, I think folding is going to be the worst option. Shoving is most likely better one. But if you have some confidence on post-flop skills, then you should be, I think calling would be totally reasonable. And not really flop you can continue with. But have to remember that on the pre-flop you need 20% of pot odds to call. Of course there is some ICM, but it's not like huge portion of your stack to invest overall. Well, against 3x you should definitely fold, and against min raise as default as well. I think in micro stakes it's not going to be a good idea to re-steal too much, because I would assume that villains are probably going to be raise calling a bit too much on average. How about pocket fours here? How would you guys play this one? Are you min raising, open folding, shoving? Hopefully no one is limping. Yeah, it's going to be pretty marginal. But with antis, I think shove is most of the time better than folding, but it's going to be still kind of thin. So if we check a shoving option, it's going to be plus 0.1 with pretty tightish ranges. So if villains are, for example, calling a bit wider, then it quite quickly becomes minus EV. So we just added few hand combos more for those guys, and now it's on the break even. So, but still, I think if we can assume that villains are not going to call that wide, then shoving is going to be better. And problem of min raising can be good if we assume that players behind us will mostly 3-bet or fold. But I would assume that in micro stakes at least, problem of min raising is that villains are most likely calling too much. And basically PP doesn't really matter that well. It can bring some tricky spots, but if we min raise here, PP calls what is going to be like 600. He has less than pot behind. We should not be folding on most flop sprays, basically. Of course, there are some flops where we can give up if it comes like something like 8-10 jack or something. Then we can fold, but or give up. But most of flops we should be stacking off, basically, or c-betting, calling. And yeah, PP can be a bit tighter. But as we can see, it's going to be pretty marginal. For example, if we are in a game where there is no antes, then I think folding is kind of default play pretty quickly. So now in the same spot without antes, we have even tighter calling ranges for the villains, and it's already on the break even basically. So not clear decision. And I don't like folding is totally reasonable, but folding or shoving is most of the time going to be the reasonable options. And that is quite, again, quite common leak that I see that people are open shoving too much weak pocket pairs from early position. So 7 queen suited should we call here? This is those spots that against good or decent player we should be snap calling, basically, with any queen pretty much, at least suited queen. But then against recreational players it's more questionable. So if we choose the queen 7 suited, he needs to be shoving around a bit over 40%. So yeah, I would usually say that we have to call this one, even against recreational players, and especially when he shows hand like that. Yeah, as Danita says, we should be calling against most players. When we get such great pots, and in here, especially against active player, we should be just shoving. Of course, this is kind of situation that when the call comes, we are pretty often not going to be in, or if we are lucky, we are flipping basically against some pocket tens or something. But at the same time, there is so much in the pot that it's worth it. Of course, we can also flat, but it's just then kind of problematic that we are then missing 2 out of 3 times, and it's going to be kind of tricky to continue if we lane c-bets. Well, even with the small blind call, this is going to be pretty mandatory. I think bottom of the range is probably something. Well, it's pretty close, like 7s or 8s are most likely our bottom of our calling range with the small blind coming into the pot. And nicely, they both have ace-8. So 8-4 as default, we should be folding. If we have a reason to believe that villains are on the tighter side, then we can try to steal really widely, but as default, definitely folding. And with in here, we should be usually 3-betting around, well, sizing wise, something like 900,000. I think 900 is pretty decent. 800 is pretty much the bottom we should be using, because anything lower than that will be getting really great price. Really great price to call from position, so I don't really want to go, or I don't really like the idea to go below 800 anyway. Well, in that situation, yeah, it improves a little bit, but for Danita's comment on the 4-4 hand, but I don't think that spot has much impact in our range. But yeah, of course it has small impact, but it's not going to be that that big when there are so many players, in my opinion. And pretty spoofy play. Basically, he needs to think that you have really wide 3-betting range for that to be reasonable. And we'll lane 3-bet here. What are we going to do with King Jack suited? At first, we want to think about in the pre-flop that if we min raise villain's house, are we calling? And if we think that he's capable of making kind of like 3-bets, then we definitely don't want to be raise folding with 20 pp or bit below this sort of hand. But usually if I think that villain is really 3-bet happy, I don't really mind to be raise calling here. For example, Queen Jack suited, I would tend to limp if I have aggressive reach, because I definitely don't want to raise fold. When he makes it non-all-in, it's kind of bit trickier in a way that I think more often he has premium hand here. Of course, we have 33% to call here, so I think best option here might be to call, and if we totally miss, we can still fold. Of course, danger of that sort of line is that, well, it's pretty close. Can we be folding, because we just have pot behind 10, and can we give it that much respect? So kind of tricky spot, in my opinion. But as default, when I'm in raise, my plan would be to call against shove, so I don't mind shoving here, because when you think about the calling option, it's just that there's going to be just one pot size bet behind, and if villain happens to be 3-betting with something that's not totally premium, then we have the danger that we are folding too much on the flop, basically. Now he checks. Usually I would still assume that villain is most likely not going to be folding too much of the better hands. So personally I would go with check and fold here. But it's just that when he has just pot size behind, we have like 33%. We need like 33% of equity. So for example, if we check, this pot with, for example, flop chilla. Hopefully this one works. So if we choose that we have King Jack suited, and we say that villain is going to be 3-betting like For example, if he has that tight range, we still have 37% against that range pre-flop. And if we click some random flops, it's just that if his range is going to be pretty value heavy, we can fold if we totally miss, but if we include that he happens to be making some tricky plays with few random hands, then we quite quickly become in the situation that if he's like shoving any flop after our call, that is it going to be plus EV to fold anymore. Yeah, even folding might be reasonable, but I think as general, at least in my own games, I would be going with the idea to min-raise call. But of course, if player pool is passive enough, then we can even min-raise fold this one. But definitely, if he uses like a bit smaller sizing, like 3-bet to 800, for example, we definitely need to be calling. And in limp pot, I would aim to pretty much check to showdown and would be check calling here. 5 doesn't really change that much. Of course, now we beat some of 4x combinations. Oh, that was well played. And now he 3-bets again. But his sizing is pretty big and king 8 is not going to be playing that greatly, so folding is most reasonable. And when he uses this sort of sizing, you should be calling some of the hands that play really well post-flop, but you can't really call that much against like 3 PP opens. But of course you get much better risk reward for 3-betting. And in general, if you are against a player who is 3-betting a lot, then you want to aim to have some limping range as well. And this one is pretty bad flop for you, so you should definitely be checking back with king 10. The problem here is that huge amount of hands basically have some sort of connection here. And if he has some sort of dry queen or king 5 or something, then you have pretty nice equity against that one as well, and quite often Villain is not going to be bluffing too much. Well, queen is actually quite good card. It's you going to be scare card in general for a lot of his range, and it doesn't really improve his range that much, so if you are c-betting flop, then I would be usually double barreling here. Now we hit the nuts, so definitely raising. And I think something like 1500 or something like that would be pretty nice. So, and most of the combination that does improve is this sort of hands, but the queen doesn't really improve his range that much. And for a key commenting, still quite strong hand in my opinion. Yeah, the king jack suited is going to be hand that you really don't want to be raise folding, but It's kind of tricky when he uses that sort of 3-bet sizing, because if you shove over him, he's not going to be folding any better hand at least. So, but at the same time, if you call, you just get such great butters on the flop that you shouldn't necessarily be folding that much either anymore. So we have almost 2 hours. We can go for one more hand history if you guys want. But that's the last one. And Eki wins. Eki wins the last one. So this time Danita was balancing his good run in the tables. I think Eki is already here. So it was 888 Super Turbo. This is not going to take that long. And of course, big difference in here is that there's no antes from the beginning, so a lot less to steal. I think this was some 1 point something dollar or something. Ace deuce you can't really play. You have no fold equity against bottom, so even if small blind folded, I would be folding, because ace deuce is not going to be ahead of pretty much. Or if he's total maniac, of course it can be a bit ahead, but it's not dominating pretty much anything, so. And you don't have any sort of folding equity. It's totally foldable hand. And now NT's got in. Open raising king 6 here. Only reason to make this sort of play would be that you expect to have a huge amount of folding equity. Because you can't raise call, your hand has bad playability post flop. And when this is micro game, I definitely don't recommend min raising here. And basically my min raising range in this spot would most likely include just big pocket pairs in micro game, in micro buy-in game, because I don't expect that I get respect from my opponents, that they would think that, oh, he min raises, he has nuts or something. So if I have some sort of mediocre type of, or even like ace king hand, I would prefer to shove, because, for example, if you have ace king here, you min raise to get 1 or 2 calls, and if you miss flop, for example, if you had ace king without 2 clubs here, it would be a pretty awkward situation. But if you min raise with queens plus or something, then most of the time you have easy decisions. And ace 5. Against unknown, I would prefer to just fold, but problem here is that if you don't have fold equity, then it's not going to be plus EV to shove. And with your stack size, you don't usually have that much fold equity, in my opinion. So free flop against some, well, this is kind of bad stack setup. Against some people with bit deeper stacks, you could you could raise small, but not against this guy most likely. And kind of special plays that can't be recommended for ABC type of stuff. In here we should be having any AX pretty much. Yeah, any AX with four-handed situation. I like checking here really easily. Villain has something, and Queen High is sometimes best, and we might even get to showdown with it sometimes. Well, kind of lying that really often he's going to have you beat. Of course, you only need to be good around one out of 4 times, so I don't think it's a mistake to do either way overall. And you are ahead. So now we are in bubble. Pretty close to the bottom of my range, but I think I would be shoving this one. It's actually probably outside of Nash, but I forgot I can take it from here. It's just that if blinds doesn't collide often enough after our fold, then it's quite quickly that Queen 9 will become decent shoving spot, and PP will have, well, it's questionable, can we say that this is wide or tight range, in a way that we are just shoving a PP from bottom, so sometimes you might see any AX to be nuts for the villain. It's just that if we decrease the amount of collides after our fold, then it becomes a lot better to be shoving Queen 9. But yeah, I don't think it's a mistake to shove or fold. Or we can make non-all in play as well, because we are small stack. He limps again. Well, yeah, this is kind of spot that when he has been limping so often and he has shown crappy hand, I might want to be stealing by pre-flop shove even with this sort of hand. Well, this one we should definitely shove. And I don't really like this sort of play, because you kind of probably have to call even if he shoves now, but he's most likely going to play wider against you if you make this sort of play. So because of that, if you have like monster hand here, it's reasonable to min raise against unknowns and so on. But this would be a great hand to shove always against anyone. Of course, when he min 3 bets, you kind of have to call and hope something good comes, and you totally miss. So I would never be in this situation, but I would most likely check fold here. I think, yeah, it's only reasonable option. We don't have anything basically. If it was like 10-6 deuce, I might donk shove here, but when we don't have even cuts-ups, we just have to check fold. But just shove pre-flop in that sort of spot. I think betting smaller here will have same benefit pretty much, because if he has any pair here, he's probably not folding. So stepping is in a way okay. Of course we have kind of hard time to represent much here, but it might not really matter, because if he has some sort of hand that hasn't hit, he's probably folding a good amount of time. But I think like 100 or 120 or something like that would have the same, pretty much the same success with much less of risk. Jack 8. Well, pretty similar spot to the Queen 9, I would say, because we are small stack. We are with shallow stack, but we have folding equity. So I think I would go with the Jack 8 here. But it's relatively close, like something like Jack 6 I would just open fold. And I think this guy haven't been min raising. Yeah, he has been limping mostly, so I think folding here is the best option. And a7 we have to play, and definitely shove. But again, spot that if we would have like big pocket, I think checking would probably be the best EV deal, because he's probably folding decent amount of time from what we have seen from him. And Jack 10 suited, we should be shoving. Of course nasty if he calls, but we should have really good amount of folding equity, and even if he calls, Jack 10 suited will have great equity overall. So problem of this line is that if the lane now raises, we are in situation where we kind of have to call if it's small raise, and if he shoves we have to fold. So we are just throwing away our folding equity and great equity hand basically. And do we really want to give him free flop? Of course we have hand that plays greatly, but it also easily ends up into quite awkward situations, kind of. So here we should definitely be pretty tight with how shallow the button is, and hope he will drop out first. And queen high is pretty much not, with how shallow our stack is, so well played to call. We lose, so more aggression, less limping, especially in spots where you can apply ICM pressure. Of course, player pool in a $1 game probably doesn't understand ICM, but they probably still have, they want to get into the money, so I think you still have a decent amount of folding equity. Of course, it's usually something that I tend to use the term static calling range is that, for example, if it takes some random 9-man or let's say 6-man situation that, let's say that button would have 200 and we would have both the same sort of stack depth. So if we check here from the Nash ranges, PP should be folding like ace king always pretty much. Well, actually ace king suited is kind of plus. Yeah, well, it's kind of questionable actually that 10 chip difference changes that hugely. But basically well, there is possibility that you will be still in the monies on the next hand, basically, when BP or button should be calling white. But anyway, in here, so against any two range, villain should just be calling 9s plus ace king, so that is clear minus EV. But often you will see that villains are not this tight, especially in micro games and even in bigger ones, so you might see that they call with, for example, something like this, might be even wider sometimes. But the question is that, is this bad if we solve any two? Of course it's going to be worse situation for us, but still solving this sort of like Jack 10 suited is going to be clearly plus EV. So even if villains are calling too wide, and pretty much too wide in a way, of course, again, if they are making way too wide calls and call something like that, then it's probably not good to solve anymore, but we have room for error somewhat. Even if he's calling big aces, it's not going to be disaster for our EV necessarily. But yeah, I think this was for the coaching this time. On the next week we will have same coaching in Finnish, so again I could make a new topic on the Finnish side for the hand histories. But yeah, thanks for sending hand histories and being active on the chat. So good night for everyone, or good luck on the tables if you play. Bye for now.